Hello and welcome to the second video in this series on building and implementing a self-hosted instance of Omeka. In this video, we will build a test server using the virtual machine software VirtualBox. Not only will this test server give you practice with building Omeka, but it will give you a safe platform to run security updates and software upgrades. In the future, you can run updates and upgrades on this test server first to identify and fix any issues before making any changes to the production server. Much like WordPress, Omeka is built on what's referred to as a LAMP server. LAMP is an acronym for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. These four components, or variations thereof, are essential to building many web applications. Linux is the operating system that ties everything together. Apache is the web server software. MySQL is the relational database that keeps all of your data, and PHP is an object-oriented server-side scripting language. It makes your pages and applications more dynamic and allows you to do things you can't do with straight HTML. PHP could be replaced with Perl or Python, and Apache could be replaced with other web server software, and MySQL could be replaced with other forms of SQL, but Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP are the traditional components of a LAMP stack, so I'm going to stick with those. They're also recommended by Omeka. So the first thing you need to do is select the version of Linux you want to use. There are hundreds of Linux distributions out there. This screen shows just a few of the more popular ones. If there's one you're already familiar with that offers server software, you're welcome to use it. But if you're new to the world of Linux, I'd recommend using Ubuntu. Not because I think it's the best, but because it has a ton of documentation out there. So if you run into problems, there's likely some documentation that will help you out. I'm going to choose Ubuntu for this demonstration because I'm recommending it for beginners, though my production server will be using Debian, which is the parent distribution of Linux for Ubuntu. They're very similar, though they do have their differences. So what we need to do is go to the Ubuntu website at ubuntu.com. In the top navigation bar is a link for server. We want to click on that. And then here we want to download Ubuntu server. And we're given two choices. One is the stable release that has ongoing support until April 2021. And we also have a beta release that has 9 months worth of security and maintenance updates. It is best that you choose the stable version, which is 16.04.3 at this point. So we'll click on the corresponding button. And it'll take a few minutes for the download to finish. So after a few minutes, your download will be done, at which point you can just drag and drop your download onto your desktop. And we'll just leave this here for right now. Now that we've downloaded our distribution of Linux, we'll need to download the VirtualBox software. You can do that at their website. If we do a Google search for VirtualBox, we want the downloads Oracle VM VirtualBox. And from this page, we can download for the operating system that we're using. In my case, I'm using Windows 7, so I'm using a Windows host. If you're using a Mac, it would be OS X, and if you're using Linux, it would be Linux distributions. I'm going to go ahead and click on Windows hosts. And the download for that begins. When it's finished, I can simply run it from the downloads bar here. and I want to run. And so the setup wizard pops up. We want to click next. We want to click next again. We don't want to change anything here, so we'll click next again. And then we will click yes. So once VirtualBox is done downloading, you'll have an icon on your desktop for VirtualBox. You're going to want to double click on that. And here you see listed two test servers that I have built previously. I've had VirtualBox on my computer for a while. You won't see these. You'll just see a blank spot here. When we create a new server, we just want to click on the new button here. And we need to name the server. So in this case, I'm just going to call it Omeka. The type is the operating system type. I'm using Microsoft Windows as my host computer, but what we need to do here is specify the virtual machine software. So in that case, we are using Linux, and we want to select that from the drop-down. And the version was supplied for us, Ubuntu 64-bit. If you chose a different distribution of Linux, you can select from these options here. There is also an option for other Linux if it's not listed here. But Ubuntu being the popular one just kind of tends to jump into that version box. So the next thing we want to do is click the next button. Omeka recommends for small installations that there be 1 gigabyte of RAM. For our test purposes, that works just fine, so I'm going to keep it at 1024 megabytes. Click next. So we'll go ahead and create a virtual hard disk now. So essentially what this is doing is making our hard drive for us. And we're going to keep the hard disk file type as VDI, and click next. And we want to dynamically allocate the hard disk file. It's so much easier, particularly when you're a beginner and when you're just building a test instance. So we'll click next. I forget what Omeka recommends for a minimum amount of storage. I'm going to bump this up to 20 just to be sure. I wouldn't do lower than 10 though. Okay, so now we see our instance of our test server that we just built right here. It's highlighted in blue. One thing we need to do before we turn it on and install our operating system is we need to direct VirtualBox where to go to get the operating system download. So that's our Ubuntu download that we have up here. So to do that, we want to make sure that Omeka is highlighted. We'll go to Settings, and we need to go to Storage. And then here, under the Controller IDE, we want to click on a new disk, and we want to choose disk. So in my case, I put our Ubuntu download on my desktop, and so I'm going to search that out here, and here it is. So now that I'm pointing to that, I can click OK. And now we're ready to turn on our new test server. And we can do that by double-clicking on this icon. And so now we get the typical Ubuntu setup. we have English, so we're going to actually click on our keyboard. We have to press enter and install Ubuntu server. So you can move up and down here by doing the arrows on your keyboard, but we just want to install Ubuntu server, so we will click on enter. Here, depending on what language you want, this is where you would choose that. I'm going to go with English, and I am in the United States, so I am going to click on that. Configuring the keyboard, I would just like for them to detect the layout, so I'm going to click yes. And I will press the Y button and the W button. And I do not have a button there, so I will click no. Many of these characters are not on my keyboard, so I'm going to just click through. In retrospect, it may have been easier just to choose what your keyboard layout was at the beginning. I'm going to click continue. And the installation process has begun. I'm going to pause as things are loading, and I will unpause as we get to points of interest to you. So there will come a point where you'll need to select a host name for the system. With some of my virtual machines, I've already used Ubuntu. This is just kind of the generic that's going to be offered. So what I'm going to do is just use Ubuntu dash, let's see, Ubuntu dash Omeka, and we'll use my keypad to get down to continue and press enter. So we need to have somebody that has administrative privileges to be the user. You could just use your own name. In my case, yeah, I'm thinking I may want to share responsibility for this virtual server, and perhaps other people will access it using the admin username. We can't use admin because that's been reserved by Ubuntu. But what we could do is, in our case, because it's a library, maybe we'll call it library admin. And keypad down to continue and enter. The username will be the same. And now we need to choose a password for the user. And we'll go down to continue. And it's very important that you remember this password, so maybe write it down. And confirm what our password is. We'll key down to continue. You may configure your home directory for encryption. That's unnecessary for our purposes, so we're going to click on no. And so now we need to set the time. I'm on the west coast of the United States, so America, Los Angeles is correct. So I want to click on yes. So here, the guided use entire disk and set up LVM. We don't want to do that. We just want to use the entire disk. Setting up LVM is unnecessary for what we're doing here. So we will key up to guided use entire disk and click enter. And here, note that all data on the disk you select will be erased. Now, the first time I encountered this, it kind of freaked me out. I thought perhaps the hard drive on my host computer was about to be wiped out. That is not the case. What has happened is VirtualBox has taken a portion of our host's hard drive. So in my case, my Windows hard drive has been partitioned and this is separate from that. So what I do in this partition will not affect my hard drive on my computer. So there's nothing to worry about here. All we need to do is hit enter. If you continue, the changes listed below will be written to the disks. Otherwise, you will be able to make further changes manually. We do want to write the changes to this disk, so this is our partition. Once again, this is separate from our hard drive on our host computer. So our normal operating system will not be affected by this. So I want to key over to yes, and I do want these changes written to the disks. Otherwise, Ubuntu won't install. So key over to yes and click enter. So after a few minutes, you'll get this screen asking for proxy information. In my case, I'm not going through a proxy to get to the World Wide Web. I'm using my host network. So I don't need to add anything here. In all likelihood, you won't either. So what we need to do is simply key down to continue and carry on. So eventually you'll get a screen asking about updates, and it's just easier not to do automatic updates. So what we'll do is we will just click enter on no automatic updates. So here, if you want to make life easy, you could simply install your LAMP server by keying down to LAMP server and pressing the space bar. This will put a little asterisk in there. Essentially what this page is a way of installing the various components of the server that you want to use. I want to show how Apache and how MySQL and how PHP are downloaded on Ubuntu. So for the purposes of this video, I'm actually not going to click on LAMP server. I'm just going to install with the standard system utilities. We have various things here. One thing that actually might be a good idea to do right off the bat is open SSH server, so I'm going to put that on. We are a virtual machine host, so we may want to click on that. Everything else we'll just leave as is, and then we'll push the enter button. And so this should take a while because we're adding a few things. So I'm just going to pause the video and come back when the installation has reached a point where we should continue. So after a few minutes of installing, you'll get this window letting you know about the grub bootloader. So what it's doing is telling us that there's only one operating system recognized on this computer, on this virtual computer, on the hard disk that we have partitioned in order to install this virtual machine. Typically, if there is in some cases, you can have a Windows machine and a Linux machine running on the same computer outside of a virtual machine. It's difficult to make that happen. In any case, what this is doing is saying that it should be okay to install the bootloader. And of course it is, and we just want to click on yes. Okay, so the installation has finished and we're able to boot up the new system. And so we want to press enter on continue. And so the system has restarted and our grub bootloader has begun, and here it is giving us all sorts of information as to the status of our system. And this can take a couple of minutes. You'll see this each time you load up your test server. So here we want to remember our username that we created in the beginning, and I believe it was library admin. And so that password that you were supposed to remember is typed in here. And here we go. We now have our terminal where we can use the command line to install and update and do all sorts of things. As you can see, we have 72 packages can be updated, and 40 of those are security updates. In order to do this, we use a program called apt, which was installed with Ubuntu. And so the first thing we want to do is make sure those updates go through. We do that by typing sudo, sudo, and so this is essentially a command that's saying I have admin privileges and I know that I'm about to do something to this computer. So we want to do sudo apt-get update and press enter. And it's asking for our password again, which it will do. It will remember that we are a administrator for 15 minutes or so after we enter our password here. And we shouldn't have to keep entering the password. So right now things are updating. And then just for good measure, we want to let the system know again that we are an administrator. So we're going to type in sudo apt-get update, or upgrade, excuse me, and enter. So before we do move on, I want to show you a command that comes in pretty handy, and that is the clear command. If you type in clear and enter, that cleans up your screen. Another really good one is the man command. So what that does is it brings up a manual for any command that you're using in Linux. So for instance, let's do man and sudo. And so what that does is it gives us a description of what that command is. So if you happen to see somebody, other tutorials, or even this one, where we start using commands that you don't understand, you can type in man and that command, and it will give you a description within the Linux manual of what that command does. So here, when we're in this screen, in order to escape, we need to press the Q button, and we have quit. So I'm just going to clear the screen. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think what we'll do is do a separate video on installing Apache and PHP and MySQL. With this video, I just want to finish up with a couple of more things. One of the problems that I run into with VirtualBox and Ubuntu Server is there's no scroll bar here, and that can be problematic for some of the things I want to do. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If we run the command dpackage, let's see here, dpackage dpkg-l, we get a list of all the programs that are installed on this server. The problem is there's no scroll bar here to scroll up the list to see what's at the top. So for instance, if I was looking to see if Apache is installed on here, I can't do that. There is a way of going up the page, but it doesn't quite work as well as I would like it to. So if you hold down Shift, and on your keyboard there is a button called Page Up, and if we hold down Shift and Page Up, you'll see that we can actually scroll up the list. The problem is there comes a point where it won't go any further. There's a cap. So if I was looking for Apache, I can't see it because I can't go any further up this list. There are other workarounds for that, but I'm lazy, and I want to be able to use the scroll bar, and I can't do that with how things are set up with VirtualBox. So my solution is to simply SSH into this virtual server using PuTTY. And we installed PuTTY on our desktop in the last video. Now, in order to do this, we have to kind of set the network up properly, and we need to shut this server down. So the first thing we're going to do is run the command sudo shutdown now, and this will always ask for the password. So I'm going to enter my password, and we're shutting down our virtual server. And what we need to do is, in the VirtualBox Manager, we want to be sure that our server is highlighted with the blue bar. And if we go to Settings, and if we go to Network, and we can set up some network adapters here. And this is just a way of connecting to a network so that we can get on the internet, or in this case, my computer will be able to access this virtual machine using our local network. And to do that, we need to change the attached to. So if we click on the drop down and click on Bridged Adapter and click OK, this will be a bridge to my local area network, and it's going to make it so that this server has its own unique IP address. Well, actually, it's dynamically allocated, but it'll be fine. We don't need to set up a static IP address in this instance. So we can now start the machine again. And this time we'll be connecting to my local area network. And that will allow me to grab an IP address that we can actually use to SSH into this server with. Okay, so we need to log in. Okay, and now we want to run the command ifconfig. And so you'll see next to the enp0s3 there is a line that says inet address, and that is the server address for this virtual server, and that is how we're going to SSH into this server. So right now I'm just writing down my IP address. It's the 10.3.20.141 address, and we'll clear that. And actually, I think I will minimize this and minimize this. And so now I'm going to open PuTTY. And under host name or IP address, we can put in that IP address that we just got. So 10.3.20.141. I'll open it. And so what this is doing is it's saying that my host computer and the virtual computer don't share a public private key code. And they will once we go ahead and click yes. We do want to get into this server, and we know this server isn't going to cause problems on our host system. So we'll click yes, and then we'll have this box here and log in as library admin, and we put in our password. And here we are. We're now in the test server. And now if we run the dpackage-l, whoops, dpackage-l, we now get the list, and we can scroll up and down. And so if I'm checking to see if Apache's here, I see that it's not. It's in alphabetical order, and Apache is not there. So I think what I'm going to do is we'll wrap up this video. I think when I come back, perhaps the first thing I'll do is, well, it's not necessary. What I'm going to do is just change the settings in PuTTY so that the font's a little bigger and easier to read, because I suspect on a little YouTube screen it may be kind of small and difficult to read. So I'm going to wrap things up now. When we come back, we will go over how to install Apache and how to install PHP and MySQL, and there's another software that Omeka recommends we put on there. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but we'll install that, and we'll install Omeka. So that will be the next video. We'll see you there.